Corpus, President of the New South Wales AFI. Thanks for coming tonight. Are you... Okay, well we're already recording. So I'd just like to remind everyone that we are recording this for tonight, and it's going to be placed onto our YouTube channel. It's better. So welcome, and tonight's a bit different to what we normally do. Tonight's going to be a bit of a discussion and hopefully quite a bit of interaction with the audience. So please feel free to talk, feel free to question, feel free to debate. This is a very interesting subject. It's going to be, everyone's going to have a lot of different opinions, and this is one of the reasons why the committee wanted to bring this subject to an education night, because it is controversial and people's opinion of negative corpus is different. So therefore, let's go and have that debate. Just reminding people that everyone gets a turn. You can have your say, not a problem with that. But please be respectful, and please let people certainly have their say. Up on the panel tonight to discuss negative corpus, we've got Mark Pellegrino from GKA. He's a private fire investigator, and he's been doing that for 5 years, and a lot of experience in analysing fire scenes and factual investigations, I think you call it.
I'm not factual.
Oh, you're not? Oh, okay.
Just the forensic side of it.
Forensic side, there you go. Next to him, Jim Monday, also a private fire investigator. Been doing it for a long time. Started out in the UK, and started out in the UK and come out to Australia to continue that. So he's got his own company, Jim Monday and Associates. And next to him, Steve Apps, who's just retired from Fire Rescue New South Wales with Fire Investigation Research Unit. Did 10 years as a fire investigator as well. So my job here is, I guess, just to introduce the panel, start the process, and I guess just to adjudicate in terms of making sure we're going in the right direction and trying to stay on topic. But certainly these three guys will, I guess, put their points of view forward on the scenario. But please, certainly get involved if you have questions, and if you want to talk about a subject, certainly let's hear it, because it's about what you people want to know and what you people understand, as well as what we do as well. So in starting off, firstly I would like to get the panel's opinion or knowledge of negative corpus, and we might start with the big man Steve Apps.
Okay.
What is negative corpus to start with?
That means you can have any number of possible scenarios or conjectures, whatever you can create in terms of the scientific method to work out the truth of the fire, where it's the origin, and how it started. You can eliminate, say you start with 10, which is quite a lot, probably unrealistic, but say you had 10, you could definitely eliminate 9. Does that mean 10 is the truth? And in the past, in the NFPA, there were some interpretations that said, logic says that it had to be something, so it must have been that 10. So if I could use an example, say you had a really expensive gold watch, and it could have only been 1 of 5 people that that had the motive and opportunity to steal that watch. So you eliminate, and you look into 4 of them, and you go, it definitely wasn't the 4. Does it mean I get the 5th guy arrested for theft? No, you still need proof. And my understanding of negative corpus is you must, the idea that, Dehaan sort of, I think he still advocates that if you get to a situation where everything else is eliminated, you can say something is, for instance, arson, even though there's no particular proof to support that. So it's all getting back to the level of proof. You must have proof. You cannot just logically deduct every other possibility. You still have to have, when you test your final hypothesis, you still must have proof for that conclusion. Because the consequences, obviously, particularly say it's criminal, someone's in the dock, you can, and that's happened particularly in America, where people are put on death row as a consequence of a fire investigator's negative corpus finding.
Steve. The other thing, just before I should have started, is that obviously we're going to be looking at discussing two questions. Now these are scenarios, and the questions have been created by Jim, and Jim obviously has an interest in this topic, and this was sort of came up from last year's when we talked about the changes to 921, the 2014 edition. Negative corpus was a bit of a topic, and that's why we decided let's go with a whole education night on negative corpus. So there will be a discussion on two questions. One is, can the process of elimination alone be sufficient to reach a fire cause? And the second one is, are the NFPA 91 parameters unnecessarily restrictive, bearing in mind the role of an expert is to provide an informed opinion based on all the available facts? So they're the two discussion points, and obviously Steve's definition of negative corpus is interrelated with those two things. So I'll move on to Jim now on his opinion of what negative corpus is about, just a definition to start off with.
Okay, very briefly, negative corpus is actually an American legal concept. It doesn't have an exact Australian equivalent, but the closest analogy that I can come up with is it's like trying to prove a murder without a body. Sometimes under very specific circumstances you might be able to do it, but most of the time, unless you've got a body, you've just got a missing person. So it's the same sort of thing. The idea within NFPA is that, as Steve said, you can eliminate all your initial hypotheses except one, but unless you find a positive piece of evidence to support that one, that remaining one, then you can't say that is the truth. Which leaves us in a quandary, as you'll see from the scenarios, when the potential ignition source has either been removed or consumed, and therefore is no longer in evidence.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Now, Mark, can you give your opinion on what you think negative corpus is? Yep.
Pretty much the same with the other two guys said.
Yes.
Pretty much eliminating ignition sources until you find the one, but you have no proof of the one. You basically eliminate everything else to determine what isn't, and then if there is no ruling out all the other ignition sources means that you can only, it has to be something that you have no evidence of that something. So it's basically along those lines.
Very good. Can I ask, does anyone else want to give an opinion on what their understanding or knowledge of negative corpus is?
Just what standard of proof we're talking about as well. Do you need to say, is it beyond reasonable doubt or on the balance of probability?
Right.
Neither.
Okay.
No, neither. In my opinion, it's neither.
It's more of a method rather
It's
than
more, it's science.
It's about a method.
it's about a
Yeah,
method.
it's a scientific method, and that what you just those two situations apply to, say, a criminal court or to a civilian court, and a fire can occur within either one of those courts. But it's not a person you're judging, even if it's an arson. It's actually the origin and the cause from that origin. That's as a forensic step. That's what you're coming up with, and so those two criteria don't apply. It's got to be the truth. The scientific method gets to the truth, and if there's no truth, then it's undetermined.
Does the scientific method always get to
Just
the actual truth
No.
without reasonable doubt? That's my
No,
point.
it doesn't.
But we
It
never
pretty
do,
much
do we?
it pretty much ties you up and not almost always get undetermined. Technically, and that's the problem. Yeah, and that's the whole. I think what will sort of ensue from this is that you look at it in these scenarios. If you've read them, you would probably, most cases, draw a fairly logical conclusion what happened in both, and that there was probably an arson.
Yeah, we'll get to those.
But
We'll certainly get to those.
There's no proof for that. It all comes down to the scientific proof.
And I guess in our industry, we do a job, and that is to form an opinion based on your knowledge, experience, and training. But this is the problem here. Like, at what point, as as a person doing this full time or whatever, part time or as a volunteer, but people are looking at you for an opinion. At what point can you say, yes, it is this determination, or it's not? And how do you get to that point? I guess that's the whole focus of that. Any other opinions on negative corpus or comments before we get into the scenarios? Yes.
Probably just
Great.
coming back to your question is also depends on what we're looking at and the jurisdiction. So, for instance, if you're looking to get, and this is about how you maybe in a jurisdiction like a coronial inquiry, where the coroner might be more open to listen to your experience and why you got to it and how you determined that and what were the other things. Well, what you may say, okay, you form that opinion, but are there any other things you can think of that would argue against what you're saying? So in that jurisdiction, because it's coronial inquisitorial, and they can ask other questions, so you're not bound by the strict rules of evidence, and even in a criminal matter that actually referred to before the Steve referred to, you've still got a judge sitting there on whether they'll allow that evidence, and that's what they call probative value and prejudicial effect.
So you're saying you should base your opinion on depending on what court you're going to?
No, I think it's still thinking better, but although we might think I can't put anything in a report, it may be that on one hand you're saying it's undetermined, but if you finish up in a coronial inquiry, the coroner could still ask you, well, based on what you're doing, what do you think? So a coronial inquiry in some instances is a bit of a fishing expedition.
Of course, yeah.
In order for the coroner to actually make a determination of fire. So you might find that, I said undetermined, you might be able to say, well, with everything I've got, I'm leaning more towards this.
Yeah.
And they may still accept that.
Okay. Comments?
Yeah, so I think the crux of it is, are we providing an opinion, which we all have opinions on a whole range of things, but in this field of fire investigation, we have an opinion. It's limited to, it benefits from, our training, knowledge and experience. All of us have different levels of those three factors. Plus there's other X factors like your energy level, your enthusiasm, your talent, all that kind of thing. It's just based on those three identifiable things, your training, knowledge and experience. Everyone will have a different opinion, but there's only one truth. And determinations by NFPA are the truth, and it's got to be the truth, the whole truth, etc. So, as opposed to an opinion, which is what we all have. So, the NFPA ties us up with the science and this determination, which, in my view, pretty much makes every fire undetermined. Yet, we all have opinions as to the real true cause and origin. So that's a big difference. And that, in a way, that's like a sub-argument. Like, why do we have determinations? Why don't the courts just allow opinions so that we can give that volume of information that's not restricted by, well, we can tell them what we looked at and why we rejected it, and we came down to something that's pretty close to, like these scenarios, if you read them, you would say, I'm sure to print this or no.
We'll get it.
Yeah, so,
We'll get it.
but that's my point, is there's an opinion, which is personal and based on a person and what you are as a person. And then there's science. Do the two meet?
Any other comments?
So, I mean, you use the science to form your opinion.
Yes.
So you can't just form an opinion, you need physical evidence to form the opinion. And your opinion has to go and be contested by either someone better than you, or with the same experience, or by a judge who decides, or a jury who decides, does this guy know what he's talking about?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Just a quick question. I work at the coroner's court. I'm one of the advocates there.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just curious because I normally get I'll get the formal document that says, let's say it says court's undetermined. So if the opinion if I was to call, let's say, one of you as a witness in the witness box, and then you've got the formal report which says undetermined, which would be, I take it according to the guidelines that are set out. But if I was to put in the witness box and then say, well, sir, are you able to tell the court what your personal opinion is about what started this fire? Would you be allowed to deviate and then give an opinion which is perhaps a little bit more, I guess, direct than what would be in the formal report that you would hand in to the coroner's court?
Good question.
Good question. My answer would be, as far as I personally am concerned, is I'd be very happy to.
Okay.
Because normally I've expressed an opinion in a report which is, I'll express a conclusion in a report which is not necessarily the totality of my opinions. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because that's what an expert opinion is about. It's about actually taking what you've found scientifically and then saying what these possibilities is more likely, less likely, based on your knowledge, training, experience, etc. But having said that, I might be more comfortable doing that after all the years that I've been doing it, and somebody's only been doing it a year, perhaps, I don't know. then again, you might get somebody who's been doing it a year who's very good, very confident, and very happy to do that. I don't know. But my position is that if you want to ask me anything further than what's in the report, you're very welcome to. So is a judge in a criminal court, of course, and barristers always, they always want to go beyond what we've written down.
Can I come back to very much what Steve said. Your opinion based on an FBA back with the science of it, but as you said, an expert is a very ambiguous word. What determines expert? Life skills, qualifications,
Well,
etc.,
what's the other
and how?
What really determines an expert?
Yeah,
Well, that's up to the court to determine if you're an expert.
That's
And
true.
They look at your resume, and that's pretty cut and dry, and your resume will always get. They go through it. I was in the court the other day, and they're reading it out and going, "Gee, that sounds impressive. You've only been there."
Yeah. If I could make
Yes, I don't really consider myself an expert.
Greg?
If we make a comment about the question, NFPA 921 is guideline for investigation. It's not prescriptive. And there's a very, very big difference when you're looking at prescriptive document like legislation,
It's a guide.
and it's a guide. So it's a guide there so that there's a scientific approach to the establishment of evidence and how that should be done, how it should be recorded, packaging, how it's collected, all those sort of guidelines on how it be done. But because the situations are continually changing, you may not be able to follow. But this is a guide, so with having that methodology in the back of your head, that this is the way I need to at least show that the evidence hasn't been contaminated, there's a guide there rather than just going at anybody, taking a sample out of the ground, throwing the paper back.
And that was from the lecture from the Re-Education Nights last year about the difference between 1033 and 921. 1033 is mandatory language. You must. Guide says you should, you may, things like that. So there is a difference.
And under our system here, 921 is not a prescriptive.
Of course, and
Under
this is
our legislation or
again,
our courts.
from last, if you weren't here, 921 is the only guide in the world to talk about how to conduct a fire investigation. There is not an Australian guide, so we don't know. Well, there is nothing for us to go on other than this. So we use this. We should be using it because it's the only one out there. If you're doing your own thing in your own way, that can be fine in this country. But as a, I guess, as an association, I hope that investigators out there are using this as much as they can because it is the only document out there that can truly show you how to conduct a fire investigation.
So can I just add one bit there? One of the indicators this is a guide and not a standard or a requirement is that if you look through it, you couldn't possibly apply everything that's in that book to every job you go to.
Yes.
Because not all of it applies to the job you're at. So, that's why it's not a requirement, it's a guide.
Beautiful. Any other comments before we get into these scenarios?
Just
Yep.
speaking about the coroner's thing, where you're a bit freer and looser about giving your evidence, and the coroner just wants to get the body of information. Can they come back to bite you if that proceeds to criminal, and you go, you're the same witness in a different court, but you said in this thing that
Good
you're
question.
So does that? Do we let ourselves open by being helpful to the coroner when later on it probably will go somewhere else?
You mean whether they can use whether they can use your opinion in the coroner's court over?
And you wouldn't normally have sort of had that same loose standard of like we call it opinion, whereas you might say it's criminal, then there's more at stake. Someone's might go.
I've only been at the coroner's court 12 months. I spent 7 years in criminal, so I'm actually not quite sure.
I'm just wondering if you just don't leave yourself a trap.
I'm actually not quite sure.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Anyway, just
But if you're going to offer an opinion to the coroner,
Yeah.
you should be willing to offer the same opinion to a criminal court.
yeah, it's a different standard of.
I can't see that
It
it
shouldn't
would
change that. No, I don't think so.
I can't see that it would lead
Your opinion or how they do it?
Both.
Your opinion.
Yeah, admissible. I agree with that.
Yeah, it'd be about the admissible. But if you're an expert, then, and it's your expert opinion, then it probably would still be admissible in the criminal. I don't think it would cause you any problems. It's only there's a lot of rules of evidence with opinion. But if you're going in as an expert witness and as part of your expert opinion, yeah, that would be admissible in a criminal court.
The difference is the way the court deals with it and the weight they give it in the totality of the evidence.
You might get a bit more cross-examination.
That's what I'm worried about. Did I say that?
Right, so let's get into scenario 1. This is written up by Jim. You are investigating a house fire. The external doors and windows were closed and secure when firefighters arrived, except for a lounge room window from which smoke and flames were venting. Inspection of the grounds outside and floor inside the window has revealed only thermal fractured, smoke-stained glass fragments. The origin of the fire is determined to be on or within a foam-padded armchair in the lounge room. Part of the cloth covering, polyester interliner and polyether foam has been consumed and the exposed surface of the timber frame is lightly charred. There are no odours or other factors to indicate the presence of ignitable hydrocarbon or liquids or other liquids on the remaining furnishing or floor. There is no 240 volt mains or extra low voltage electrical wiring or equipment in the vicinity of the scene. No batteries or electronic equipment remains are found in the burnt area. The 2 adult occupants of the house are reported to be non-smokers, and you can find no cigarette packs, butts, spent matches, etc. in the garbage bins. The lounge room window faces south, and there are no lenses or curved mirrors in the room. There is no indication of a prolonged period of smouldering, and no materials in the house susceptible to self-heating. You have inspected the exterior of the building, can find no indication of penetration by a missile of any sort. Can you reach any conclusion about the heat source which ignited the armchair? Can you determine the cause of the fire within NFPA 91 parameters? Additional information.
Stop there.
Stop there?
Stop there, because the idea is that we do that and then we say, does the additional information change your opinion?
Okay. So, from the initial information, opinions from the panel, please.
Firstly, this was completely designed to pretty much say that someone's sort of done something. So, I mean, obviously, can I reach a conclusion about the heat source? I can't reach a conclusion about the heat source itself, but I can reach a conclusion that human intervention or a human action has played a part in the role of the fire. Can I determine the cause of the fire within the parameters of the NFPA 921? Apparently no. I'd have to say the cause of the fire is undetermined. However, in my opinion, I don't think there is enough determinations in NFPA in relation to the causations of fire, where that basically says the causations of fire are deliberate, accidental, or from human nature. I think I got that right. Oh, sorry. What is it? It is accidental, natural, deliberate, or undetermined. So they're the 4. My opinion, we need 5. So basically, I'm on the lines of we need a deliberate. It's either a deliberate fire or a result of human intervention, which means a human action has been involved in the causation of the fire. And from that, I can't determine if it was a deliberate human intervention or if it was an accidental human intervention. Then 3rd, accidental, 4th, undetermined, and 5, natural law, which pretty much, So they're the 5 I think we need. Obviously, they only go with 4 in NFPA, and basically, I disagree with. I think negative corpus as a method is fine, because basically I even use it in litigation, like fires that lead to litigation with appliances. I still rule out appliances to determine which appliance the fire started in, which is the same method as this, but this is obviously relating to a different sort of aspect of fire in the sense is it deliberate. So I think the method is fine. I just think that using it to form an opinion on a deliberate fire is completely a no-no, and I think that's the major problem with it is what happened in the US is they used it to determine deliberate fires, which is impossible because to determine a deliberate fire you need to prove intent, which is a mindset, and you cannot do that with negative corpus determining, using it to determine that, okay, a human had to have done it, so what? A human had to have done it, but you don't know why it happened or how it happened. So, to me, I can't tell you what the heat source is. I could probably tell, in my opinion, it'd probably be a bit lighter. Could have been a cigarette butt. And to me, it was a result of human intervention, but obviously, within the parameters of this booklet, it's saying that the fire has to be undetermined. where I don't think the fire is undetermined. It's not undetermined. We've basically got, as an experienced fire examiner, you basically know how many possible ignition sources there are, and if let's say there's 10, like there's 10 possible ignition sources. We know there's only 10. If you can rule out 9, there can't be another ignition source. So, if you let's say there's 10, you rule out the 9, it had to be a result of a human action, and that's the way I see it.
Okay, I think that's very well put. Question, can you reach any conclusion about the heat source which ignited the armchair? The answer comes in 2 parts. The first part is I can reach a conclusion about the heat sources which did not ignite the armchair, okay? Which is exactly what you said, which is a process of elimination. This book still says you can do a process of elimination. In fact, it advises that you do that. The question is what you do when you get to the end of the process of elimination. So yes, the process of elimination, we go through it, nothing's been thrown in, there's no electricals, etc., etc. So we come down to this question of, we've got only really one issue here, which is, have I got enough evidence to say which particular heat source ignited the armchair? And the answer, I think, is quite correctly is no. Some of the information you've been given here, they're reported to be non-smokers, you can't find any cigarette packs, etc. We don't have any information about whether they've had visitors. That's not in there. We don't have any information about whether they use candles. We don't have any information about whether they use joss sticks or incense burners, whether they're of a faith which has an indoor shrine. None of that's in there. So they're all things that we'd have to take into account before we even start going to human intervention. I suppose lighting candles on a shrine is human intervention, is human activity. So as far as I'm concerned, I agree with Mark that you can't reach any specific conclusion about a heat source. What you can say is there must have been some human activity involved in it somewhere. The second question, can you determine the cause of the fire within these parameters that are in here? Again, I agree with you that on the purely factual basis of what you found, it has to be undetermined. But with that rider that you put on, and that's the way that personally I would report it, I would say the cause of the fire, the specific cause of the fire is undetermined, but most probably involves some form of human activity. That would be my phrase.
Right, the scenario pretty much extensively covers all possible conjecture to an accidental fire. Everything's been mentioned. There's nothing except maybe lightning. Yeah, something, but the point of this is you can absolutely rule out every accidental cause of ignition. Which, so if it's not accidental, then it must be non-accidental, which is incendiary deliberate. But as you pointed out, there's no actual proof for that. But negative corpus would say, and as the harm still states in code, well, it's got to be arson. And he says that's a valid determination. He contradicts 921. Yeah. But can you reach any conclusion? Well, you can give an opinion that of the possible stroke probable ignition by, as you say, human intervention, whether deliberate or accidental. We don't know the mindset of the person. So, but I think that would seem like a logical consequence. But then you take it to the next question, 921. Well, you have to say it's undetermined. And that's the frustration, as we're saying with 921. Everything pretty much is undetermined. Even when you've got a lot of boxes ticked, you can't tick that last box. It's pretty much got to be undetermined.
I think the biggest issue is what they've tried to do is use scientific method to incorporate scientific methods so no one can be contested and can't be touched. I mean, scientific method is for new frontier sort of research. We know a lot about fire. We know all the potential ignition sources. There's not an ignition source that we don't know about. So that's why you can use negative corpus, because we know all the information. We're not looking for something new. We're not conducting new research. The only problem with negative corpus is the way the Americans used it to prove it was a deliberate fire is just completely incorrect. And it's
Just Mark, just on the scientific method, I kind of understand where you're going with, but I think what you shouldn't do is discard the scientific method because it's too propeller-ish.
No, no,
It's just a simple step-by-step process to make sure that
Yeah.
you've covered it.
Yeah, it's like, see, they go along the lines of, okay, if it's not there, I mean, just because it's, you know, well, the whole thing about negative corpus, you ruled out everything else, so it has to be that. And they're basically on the lines of, okay, if you've only ever seen red Ferraris, is there such thing as a yellow Ferrari? So it's sort of along that line. But that's if you don't know every colour of a Ferrari. If you know every colour of a Ferrari, you know, you can rule it, you know, you can say there's no such thing as a purple Ferrari. Unless someone's painted their Ferrari purple, which actually is crucified. But you know what I'm saying? We've got a closed box. We've got the information. We're not, you know, looking to new, it's not new research. The scientific method applies when you're conducting research or you're pushing the boundaries.
I think it's not research, it's actually the truth.
Yeah.
Not research. I mean, that's one of the methodologies for research, but it's actually to find the truth of the fire, the cause and the origin. So,
Yeah.
The other point about it is that it's a proven methodology. And when you go to court and if they ask you, how did you come to this conclusion? Well, you say, well, I used a methodology.
Yeah.
And if an investigator didn't have a methodology, he's going to look like an idiot. Because it's completely subjective. I've been doing this for 30 years. You tell me I don't know what to, you know,
I know, but it's just that one section of the scientific method. It's that one section that says you can't say just because you know, it's not there. You know what I mean? Because in other things like, you know, every other science, it is very valid. But in this closed box that we know, the potential ignition sources, it has to be.
I think what you're arguing is that
Yes.
the scientific method isn't a valid methodology for fire investigation.
No, it is.
Isn't that what you're saying?
No, not at all. The scientific, it's just that one part of scientific.
But you can't, you've got to take the whole thing. You can't say that doesn't
No,
suit.
not necessarily.
No, you can't. No, you can't. Do you see where I'm coming at here? If you take on scientific method, you take the whole freaking thing. You don't take the bit that suits you and discard the bit that doesn't.
Because that implies, you know, because, like I said, because we've got the closed box, you don't need that bit of the scientific.
Which part are you talking about?
It's it's basically,
The part of the scientific
because
method.
when
you
they
don't
say
read.
that, no, well, that's not the part that's in it.
Okay. Anyway, we'll probably get a bit
We'll
distracted.
come back to that, that's fine.
But a negative corpus is part and parcel of the scientific method, so
Yes.
it's a valid. But my point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to use the scientific method, you have to use the whole of it. You can't just use the part. You can't use 90% of it that suits you and say the 10%.
No. That bit of the scientific method.
That is the scientific method.
Yeah, no, yeah.
What's the
We're talking about the
Sorry,
knowledge
can I just
that it's
interject?
based on,
I guess more.
the physical knowledge that it's based on, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Comments?
I think the part that would raise my interest is the third line.
Third line?
The third floor inside the window of the building is built with brackets, smoke stained glass brackets. You know, is the glass protecting the carpet or not? So it's plastered on the floor before it starts?
Okay, so what I was getting at there was there's no indication that the windows get penetrated before the fire. That's what I was trying to get at.
More about thermal fracture, not initial fracture.
Yeah.
Still shouts, but I'm going to need some water for you.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, so,
Sorry, if I could just add something?
sure.
With the scientific method here, what we get down to right at the end is to test the hypothesis and select a final hypothesis, and there's a feedback loop which says collect data. Now, one of the arguments about negative corpus is that if you get to the end and you're faced with this situation we've got here where we've got an undetermined cause, what we can do then is we can go into our feedback loop and go back and try and collect some more data. So, for example, what we could do is take a matching chair from the roof, there's a matching chair, do some burn tests on it, and we'd say, okay, well, we can rule out a cigarette because the cigarette won't ignite this kind of chair. Or, you know, so we can refine further and further. So what we can do, although we may never be able to put our finger on one thing and say that is the cause of this fire, we can keep going around in our iterative loop of our feedback loop of our hypotheses, refining and refining and refining until we get to a point where we can say the probability of it being anything else is vanishingly small.
And that data could come 6 months later.
That could come 6 months later, it could come 10 years later when somebody does some research. New research that, we don't know about.
Or you talk about, oh yeah, I do remember I did have friends over that day, and that might come up
Absolutely.
weeks and weeks into the future.
Okay, so can we have comments about the scenario before we go on to additional information? Yes.
One of the comments, the thing I noticed, and Tim sort of alluded to it, is the fact that, for starters, this has been a fire scene that we've got a lot of physical evidence that actually can be evaluated. The police have to go on the flash over and done all sorts of stuff. Because negative corpus to be accepted under 921 also has to be able to say that the investigator has got a very specific point of origin. Not area of origin, point of origin. And then you've got to hone in on that. So if you're going to start using, you've got to say it started exactly there. If we can't say it started exactly there, you can't even go there.
And 921 states that if you haven't got a point of origin, then you shouldn't be making a determination.
That's what
But it does state some circumstances you can do it, such as deliberate petrol, obvious. But yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you make a good point.
So that in the evaluation of the fire scene, the way I'm reading that with thermal fractions in glass, smoke deposits, blah, 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 that you put together, it's obviously a scene that we've got some physical indicators can be evaluated. Beyond that, you're already stuck because you've got to come to the point where the fire developed from.
And if you go to a black hole in the middle of the country, forget it. All you're doing then is balancing probabilities.
Any other comments? Carl?
Yeah, we were saying before, you were talking about having all the information there. Very rarely you can have all the information there. It's either been destroyed by fire, or destroyed by firemen when they arrive, what's been carried off, what's been disturbed, what's been moved. You really don't know. You don't have a whole picture of the scene, so you can't eliminate everything that is possibly there, because there's a lot of elements that could have changed the scene before you arrived.
And certainly that's more relevant in the private industry than it is in the government industry. It's private investigators arriving at some time after the scene. It makes it much more difficult to do what they need to do. Any other comments before we go on to additional information? No. Happy? Okay, so we have additional information. The occupants were seen leaving by car approximately 5 minutes before a neighbour heard glass breaking and saw smoke coming from the house. The landlord has reported to police that the occupants were 3 months behind in rent payments. Another neighbour reports seeing a removals truck at the house a week ago, followed by a couple of days later by a St Vincent de Paul van. Does any of the above change your opinion about A, the most likely heat source, and B, the determination of the fire clause within NFPA parameters? Jonathan?
Yes. Okay, if you're asking for my opinion as opposed to my determination, I would say my opinion, yes, it does. It does reinforce the idea that the Nankin frame was introduced at that point of origin. But B, the determination still remains undetermined, unfortunately, because that's what 921 says in a nutshell. So
What
opinion.
suburb were you?
What's up there?
Mount Druitt.
Maryland's.
You don't bother to go there. If you live before you set out. Anyway.
They would have been bringing furniture in.
Well, that was the point I was trying to make there. They're taking all the good stuff out and putting the rubbish in here. From my point of view, I would say that it doesn't change my opinion about the most likely heat source because that's still undetermined. It doesn't change my opinion about the determination of fire cause within these parameters, but it may well strengthen my opinion that the fire was deliberately started, which is a different thing from a determination according to these parameters. Does that make sense?
That's kind of like I was saying. The opinion's one thing. A,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, it does strengthen it,
Oh, okay.
in my
Yeah,
opinion,
all right, yeah.
because that's an opinion. That's what I think.
Yeah.
It does support that, but the determination still remains undetermined.
Okay.
For me, it doesn't change my determination. I'd still say it was a result of human intervention. This information obviously would indicate to me that these people, the car leaving was, the people in the car leaving were involved or had done something to cause the fire. As a fire investigator, I don't think it's my right or obligation to determine after the determination of the fire. To me, it's someone else's role to determine what these circumstances mean, because these are just circumstances. They haven't been tested, they haven't been tried. You know, you'd have to interview people. So, like in our industry, we turn to factual investigators to go work out the circumstances behind the fire, work out who these people were, why were they there, what did they do, and based on the information that he can process and get, he can wait onto my human intervention if the fire was an accident. Like, was there a female and male that went in there, something happened, they had a cigarette afterwards and left? Or was it, let's say it was the tenants, did he go in there, did he do it deliberately? And that's his role, that's not my role. My role isn't to catch people, my role isn't to work out who it was, my role is to gather all the evidence I can gather to help assist with that role. So, it doesn't, I mean, obviously I would suggest that these people, this information needs to be looked at, but it's not my role to look at it. I collect the evidence, and I, you know, for the court, or for a factual investigator, or for a detective, and they need to piece all the puzzles together. I'm only one piece of the puzzle. So this information, although it's relevant, it's sort of irrelevant to my determination, because it can create bias. And if I'm biased, because if I say, well, yeah, this appears to be deliberate, I could be completely wrong. So it won't change my opinion on the determination of fire.
Could I just expand one point on that? I'd agree with you about the second two bits. The only question I'd have there is, as an expert, I won't use the word expert, as a specialist fire investigator, you might be asked what your opinion is, whether about the duration, that 5 minutes, whether that would be long enough for a smouldering cigarette to produce a flaming fire. So that would be something where I think you probably have an input.
Me technically, I've never done testing on duration, on fire duration. So
It's heaps in the literature.
yeah, in that sort of, probably an expert in that area, so to speak. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Obviously 5 minutes afterwards. I mean, obviously, like I said, whoever left in that car probably is involved.
Has got something to do with it.
Has got something to do with it. But it won't change.
Okay, that's fair. Comments from the floor about the additional information? Determinations changed? Anything? Yes, Greg.
It's not that I want to make a comment from the floor.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's going on with what Jim said. Again, with the years of experience, I'd be honing in. There's two things that are really relevant here, is the time and the fact that we've got thermal fractures. As scene examiners, though, I'd expect anybody that's doing this in the course of their employment or whatever, the information is we heard glass breaking. Part of our scene examination would include whether other windows were broken. So there's detail involved in the scene examination here to work out could they have heard a glass breaking such as in the domestic argument beforehand, or have we gone around, there's no evidence of any other broken glass, all the windows are intact, other than the room where there's been thermal failure of the glass. Because that's got to be the fire development point to cause that thermal failure. So you start getting your timeline down by the elimination of other glass that could have broken, and be able to say, well, what they heard was that glass in the window failure that failed because of the fire. And then it comes back to what Jim said, could the fire develop from an armchair, but enough heat output to cause a thermal failure in that room at the time. So if all that other information has been captured by me in the scene examination, it could help me to, whoever doing it, help the person to then make a determination on whether that could have occurred. And then leading you back to say, well, all I can say is based on that happening in that period of time, where it started.
Other comments? Beautiful. How are these guys looking in the coroner's court, right?
Well, it's not a criminal court. So. Hey, I've got one coming up. It's pretty similar. The removalist van.
So they get plenty of leeway, do they?
Yeah, well, what if there's, as a fire investigator, you record how many the contents inside the house, so the truck could be eliminated by you recording the contents inside the house. So what if the house is still fully furnished and everything is in there?
Yeah.
So the removalist truck becomes irrelevant in that case.
Unless the stuff that's in there is not the same stuff that was in there before.
Well, yeah.
You know, that's, I mean, that's
But
been done.
that's something you record, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the point. So if they're, in an insurance situation, if they're making a claim for, you know, a Queen Anne four-poster bed, and they've got a fruity furniture job in there, you're going to have a note of that, and that's going to become an issue. Now, one of the problems that can I switch hats? I'm now back in my previous life. One of the problems I think that a lot of us in the forensic science business with the cops perhaps didn't do enough was record things like that. You'd go in and you'd sketch out a bedroom and you'd say it's got a double bed in it, it's got two bedside tables, it's got a TV, and nobody would write down what make the TV was or where the double bed came, whether it was a ceiling mattress or whatever. Nobody would write that down, you know. And I'm not casting any aspersions, but I guess there's probably a lot of people in this room that don't on a regular basis. And that can become important at a later stage. Because if somebody does say, it burnt my 42-inch Sony TV and all you had on your plan is the TV, how can you contradict it?
100 photos of the same.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, that's a great advantage of